China panel of the first meeting of the conference. Now, we are supposed to have 4 presentations today, but unfortunately, Dr. Wu of Oxford University will not be able to come, right? So that we are left with only 3 presentations, and all the 3 presentations are in one way or another about the green transition in China's performance in the global green transition, right? And the industrial development in relation to that. Now, so the first presentation, right, according to the schedule, is the program is to be Fanqi to talk about divergent governance paths, exploring local industrial strategy in China's NEV development. NEV stands for new energy vehicles, mainly electrical vehicles. So Fanqi would like to come out. Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to introduce China's mission-oriented innovation policy in new energy vehicle industry. And I will introduce 4 different regional models of developing NEVs in China. Those are Shanghai, Guangzhou, Hefei, and Hainan province. And so first, I would like to introduce the definition of MOIP, which stands for Mission-Oriented Innovation Policy. So this term is produced and popularized by Mariana-Mazzucato. And so he observed that in recent years, China and EU and the US more and more, they are going towards the public policy making as mission-oriented. So it's like the state, they go beyond the market failure correction and they set the broad mission, such as decarbonization and digitalization and green change. And under that grand mission, they mobilize different sectors working towards the grand mission so that altogether we can achieve the grand mission, such as green transition. Now, more and more people observe that China is adopting this mission-oriented approach because China has the institutional tradition of this mobilization of resources towards the goals and the missions. So you can see that the biggest mission of China is to achieve the carbon neutralization by 2026 and carbon peak by 2030. And under that goal, China set different goals in different sectors. Mainly, you can see that in Made in China 2025, China set different goals in different technological sectors, such as electric vehicles and solar panels, green powers. So all together towards the carbon neutralization in 2060. So you can see from this graph that on the top is the grand mission, the carbon neutrality by 2060. And then we have different sectors, different projects. They are aligned with each other and connecting with each other. So those projects should be facilitated by different departments, like the Ministry of Technology and the Development Commission. All of the departments, they're working together to facilitate this green transition in different sectors. And now we understand that China has a traditional of this mission-oriented approach and developmental state approach, but now the goal is green transition. So it's a quite broad framework, but to understand how China really achieved those goals, we need to understand how the local government achieve those goals under this big framework. Because the political economy between the central state and local state and local governments models actually shape the industrial outcome. So the recent studies on IIPPE in China mainly focus on national level. So more and more scholars, they observe that China is adopting those mission-oriented approach towards China's green transition. And China is operating within the top-down political system. Within that system, China privilege expectation settings such as carbon neutrality goals and market creation instruments such as adopting tax and subsidies and investment towards those green sectors. On the local level, this part scholars didn't draw much attention on the local governments. But recent finding is that the local governments, they engage in tackling local experimentation and building ecosystem and networks within the local level. They build a network with firms and research centers to create the ecosystem to facilitate the green transition. So now we understand that the MOAP framework in China shouldn't be understood by one uniform model. So it's composed by different regional models and the top-down models. So it's really important to understand how local government implement those missions and policies under this grand framework. And so to understand the local governance, we need to review in the history or in the last decades how the regional governance model changed. And mostly they changed because of the central and local relationships. So we can see that in 2000s, the local governments are mainly driven by decentralization and GDP-oriented growth. So that raised the concerns over environmental issues and pollutions. So we can see that this model is not viable and sustainable in the long run. And some scholars observe that after Xi's administration, she tightened the control and we observe that strong centralization both politically and economically. So that reduced the local competition, reduced the competition between local governments. So also there are tightened national planning. And since 2020s, we can see that the policy is working towards the mission-oriented approach. It's more aligning with the green transition and high-tech development. So we need, so the question now raised is that how to achieve the grand mission while local government, they have less incentive to compete with each other. And what are the constraints of local governments and how they innovate of their governance model towards the goal. So we see the trilemma of local government. One is mission set by the national state, and then the local development and local economic growth. And the third is local governance innovation. So the question is how local government innovate their new way of development to meet the new constraint, to meet the new standards. And then so my research, we studied 4 regions in China in NEV industries, and then I developed this theoretical framework based on mission-oriented policy, past dependence, and development post states. And also this framework is developed through my fieldwork in China. So basically my framework is to understand local governance through their vertical coordination between the local central state and their horizontal coordination with firms, research center, organizations, and society. So from the developmental state theory, the Peter Evans, we know that the local state should be should have embedded autonomy within the local network. So this is how I developed this analytical framework. So why I choose those 4 cities or 4 localities? Shanghai is really classical developmental local state approach, and Shanghai also have a long history of auto industrial base in auto industry development. So Shanghai is a must go-to place. And Guangzhou is quite famous for its market oriented approach of local development. And Hainan is quite different because it's province level, is not a city level. But Hainan is quite small island, and those policies that they are universally applied to the whole island. So I chose Hainan. And also Hainan have its strategic role in like the free trade port and national ecological civilization pilot zone. So that's why I chose Hainan as an example. And finally is Hefei, because their government experiment with the entrepreneurial state experimentation with auto industry and local high-tech industry. So that's why I chose those 4 places. So in the research, I did the fieldwork last year from March to July, and I talked to local government officials. Those are the people from local government and NED politicization centers, and also auto industrial associations. I also talked to senior manager from the auto firms, and most of them are state-owned enterprise, and also talked about representatives of the auto associations. But I understand my research has some constraint because my personal network can be centered within the government and SMEs. So that might lack some understanding of private firms, especially the region emergence of private Chinese auto firms. So my research finding is that there are 4 different local governance model. So the Guangzhou is adopting market coordination approach because its institutional legacy is market oriented. And Guangzhou is a city with very long automotive history. It has become strong because it's joint ventured, especially with Honda and Toyota. So it's economy heavily depending on the joint venture companies. But now the government, they are pushing towards a green change of auto industry. Those joint ventures developed upon internal combustion vehicles can be a lag for the firms and the Guangzhou cities. So their advantage now become the disadvantage for their green transition. But they are now actively engaged to have the breakthrough, path breaking. For example, they leverage the horizontal coordination with Huawei and the new partner to develop smart cars, and also the alliance with Huawei to co-develop intelligence vehicles. But we couldn't see they had made much progress within those horizontal coordinations. So we can see that the GVs become the lag and the burden for Guangzhou to for its auto green transition. Then we see Hainan is a totally different case because Hainan didn't really have a auto industrial base. So for Hainan, they don't have that burden to go for green transition. And another thing, it's important that Hainan has a strong central backing, strong central policy backings. For example, they have the strategic role in ecological zones and the near zero carbon demonstration zones. And also Hainan aggressively choose to ban ICE in 2030. And that is pretty aggressive in terms of policy. So that push for the auto industry to go green aggressively compared to other provinces. And we can see that Hainan is quite internationally, according to the horizontal coordination. So they align with the think tank, such as Energy Foundation from California. And they also signed the multi-agreement with California government to learn from each other's practice in terms of the green transition. And so you can see from this case that for Hainan, without a strong industrial base or a strong industrial legacy, they are actually easier for them to go green transition. So for them, it's like a past planning process, mainly through market creation by adopting new energy vehicles. And next is Shanghai. Shanghai is a pretty classic developmental state approach in developing its auto industry in the past decades. But now that it's also heavily relying on SGV's joint ventures with Volkswagen, Germany past. But now those joint ventures become the burden for Shanghai to go green. And because for those joint ventures, if they want to develop new electric vehicle model, they need to discuss and talk to the German headquarters. So it's pretty hard for them to be quick at the turning green. But now Shanghai, they are going more towards like smart mobility pilots in different districts. They're kind of experimenting different smart mobilities and different industrial clusters within Shanghai, different districts. But now we couldn't see any good or outperforming brands from Shanghai auto industry. But we can also see that the Shanghai government, they bring in Tesla to enter in Shanghai auto industry to create the competition between Shanghai local industry. So the takeaway is that although Shanghai didn't develop its own outperforming electric vehicles, they are going towards the smart mobility. They are going towards a new chance of competition in the future. And the final one is Hefei representing an entrepreneurial state model. Hefei is quite poor city in the past. And then they didn't really have a strong auto industry. They produced low-end vehicles that couldn't really compete with those joint ventures. But the advantage of Hefei is that they have strong ties with national elites. And so they can get the new information or secret information from the central leadership so that they can quickly plan out their industrial policy ahead compared to other provinces. So the advantage of Hefei is that they can quickly align with the national planning, such as Made in China 2025, and to plan out their investments in those high-tech sector. So their government, their work as the investors to those high-tech industries and to complement their local industrial chain to facilitate the local economic growth. So the takeaway from IIPPE is that they illustrate an entrepreneurial coordination model. The state work as investors to facilitate the NEV industry in the local area. So in this graph, you can see those 4 different areas presents different governance model, and they also have different features. The conclusion is that although the MLAP is a large framework, but it also represents heterogeneous local strategies. And although local government, they have constraints, but they still have the policy room for institutional innovation space under the centralized mission. The performance of regional development trajectory is highly shaped by their path dependency and how they mobilize their resources both vertically and horizontally. And those regions without the entrenched automotive industry or industry base have more flexibility, and they have more space for the green transition. In the contrast, the city with strong legs, strong legacies, can face the burden and the unlockings comparing to those other cities. Thank you for your listening.
Okay, thanks to Fanqi for the presentation and for giving the time. I guess we can have all the 3 presentations and then now time for discussion because the 3 papers are related anyway. Right, so our next presentation will be Alicia from, I think from Mexico. Right? She's joining us online, so it's sorry, where's it? Yeah, Alicia with co-authored Adheli. So the presentations okay, they are now here. So you have 25 minutes for the presentation. Okay, please.
Abelardo is going to do the translation.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, I would like to know, do you hear us?
Can we hear them? Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
But
Okay. So we don't have any problem. So
So
maybe
wait a second, we need to display. We need to get out and then for Alicia to share the screen.
okay, so I can Adheli, ¿lo haces o lo hago yo rápido?
Si quiere usted, doctora, porque no sé si me escuchen bien.
Okay. So, well, I'm going to share my PowerPoint.
that's right, isn't it? That's right.
Have you shared your file?
Let me try, because I have everything here, but when you want to make the things, I don't know how. I just can't. Let me.
You have to.
Okay, share. I will do it.
No.
Share.
Yeah. Try that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I will try to do it as soon as you have the PowerPoint. At the same time, I send them to Sam. And well, this is a work. This is our paper, China and electric vehicles towards a renewable energy transition. And this is a paper that we has written with Adheli and me. And it is about the China electric vehicles toward a renewable energy transition. So one of the Chinese electric cars have emerged as a key force in the transition to a more sustainable mobility. and standing out as a model to follow in the fight against climate change. So China, as a global leader in the production and adoption of electric vehicles, has accelerated the phase out of fossil fuel-powered cars, driven by a state industrial policy based on technological innovation in batteries and propulsion systems. So what we have seen this and also in other the change that many corporations in China has had is how the innovation process is very important, and also how China, big government and big bank has a model of a great development. So the objective of this paper is how this EVS is driven by a state industrial policy through incentives and increasing investment in technology as part of a decarbonization process and aligns with the Paris Agreement and the 2030 agenda it is in a global expansion. So our hypothesis, principal hypothesis, is the how creative destruction teaches us how a new product displays an old one, but also how the strategy of a big government and big bank can promote an economic policy that it creates new jobs. So this is how we are written the paper, but here is and now I think Adheli can explain the next part. So why do you, Adheli, why don't you explain this chart? So
Yes,
then,
yes,
yes,
yes, I can.
just try to do
Okay.
that.
Yes, thank you, Abelardo. Bueno, en esta lámina nos centramos en explicar cuáles son los criterios, en este caso, teóricos, para
In
explicar
this
como cuál es la
chart,
hipótesis
we're
que tenemos
explaining
para abarcar
the
este trabajo,
theoretical
¿no?
basis,
Primeramente
the
tenemos
analysis.
el concepto de destrucción creativa, apoyado un poco en la parte de la teoría de Schumpeter.
First,
bueno,
creative destruction based on Schumpeter.
ajá, tomando esto como el concepto de la innovación o la innovación creativa como una relación intrínseca entre los bancos y el empresario.
Innovation
Incluso,
based in a creative between the entrepreneur and the banking system.
ajá, incluso hay autores como el geógrafo David Harvey, quienes hacen una crítica al modelo económico de cómo la innovación es una estrategia debidamente planificada para contener lo que es la caída de la tasa de ganancia, ¿no?
David
Entonces,
Harvey
esto da lugar.
says explains how technological innovation is a means to counter the falling rate of profit.
Y bueno, también, pues cómo esta generación de nuevos productos, pues da con ello a la generación de nuevas ganancias.
And the design of new product gives place to more profit.
El siguiente concepto es el concepto de Minsky, llamado el Big Government.
The second
caso,
concept is Minsky's big government idea.
En este caso estamos tomando el Big Government desde la parte institucional, ya que a través de este papel, que es el papel de las instituciones, sobre todo en la parte gubernamental del Estado chino, pues tenemos varios incentivos que pues no solo se les ha proporcionado a las empresas nacionales, sino que también a las empresas extranjeras, y esto
We're
a su vez
considering here the institutional Chinese framework that support not only national but international companies.
Y esto de alguna forma pues ha impulsado lo que es el concepto de la innovación y pues lo que ha llevado nuevamente a la creación de nuevas estrategias para impulsar el crecimiento del sector automotriz de los automóviles eléctricos dentro del territorio nacional y también poco a poco irlo expandiendo a nivel internacional, sobre todo en la parte de América Latina y el mercado europeo.
So government has been central in the promotion of the auto industry nationally and internationally, especially in Latin America.
Okay, y finalmente tenemos el concepto de el Green Finance o las finanzas verdes, y eso aquí estamos pues nosotros acuñando sobre todo el papel que están jugando los inversionistas institucionales, sobre todo en el manejo de la gestión de deuda, la emisión de bonos, para pues también impulsar la cotización de estas empresas que se encuentran en los mercados bursátiles.
And the third concept is green finance and how the financial institutions are raising capital with this orientation focused on the development of this auto industry.
Okay. Y pues de esta forma, a través de todas estas estrategias que ha impulsado el gobierno chino, pues esto conllevó a que se tuvieran en lista principalmente los rankings de la revista Fortune, pues 4 principales empresas de la industria automotriz y los que son realmente llamados como los 4 fantásticos, ¿no?
So
en este
now
caso,
we have in the lists of the most important enterprises these 4 auto enterprises that are called the Miracle 4.
¿Ok? De esta forma, pues estas empresas automotrices se han integrado pues a los mercados financieros, cotizando en los mercados bursátiles y poco a
These
poco integrándose
enterprises have been
al proceso de
incorporated
financiarización de
to
la
the
economía.
financial markets,
Integrándose al proceso de financiarización de la economía.
contributing to the financialization process of the economy.
Y bueno, esto es lo que llamaría algunos teóricos como Hammer, como la dominación del capital financiero sobre las relaciones de producción.
So this would be an aspect of the finance dominance over industry and production.
Y bueno, otro aspecto que queremos resaltar aquí es el papel de las crisis económicas que han intensificado pues también la fragmentación del sistema productivo.
Another aspect we put emphasis is the effect of economic crisis.
Ajá, lo que ha llevado a las grandes corporaciones, principalmente a las occidentales, llámense europeas, estadounidenses o incluso a las japonesas, a buscar pues nuevas estrategias de industrialización y
That
de alguna
has
manera también de financiamiento.
provoked the search for new economic and financial strategies by enterprises all over the world, American, European, and Japanese.
Y bueno, de esta forma, las estrategias de joint ventures fueron una de las principales estrategias para acceder al know-how que tenían estas empresas y de esta forma, pues, aprovechar de alguna manera lo que fue la crisis en el sector productivo, que permitieron el auge y la inserción de nuevas corporaciones que venían de países emergentes, pero principalmente de China.
Joint venture was a privileged strategy to confront the effects of crisis.
Y bueno, todas estas estrategias fueron supervisadas por el Estado chino, quien ha puesto a disposición bancos, financiamiento, inversión pública a sus
Chinese
empresas.
state has supervised the development of the auto industry with access to resources, finance.
Y bueno, también ha impuesto reglas de producción y diseño a los fabricantes extranjeros para de esta forma tener ventajas competitivas de mano de obra y tecnología.
Searching for competitive advantages, it has given rules to foreign enterprises that operate in China.
Y bueno, de esta forma, como ya lo habíamos mencionado, pues China logró colocar a 18 corporativos automotrices en los principales rankings de evaluación de las grandes corporaciones.
China has been able to put 18 corporations among the most important worldwide.
Y bueno, de esta forma, pues tenemos primeramente a la empresa, la primera empresa que se fundó en el marco de las relaciones con la Unión Soviética, llamada FAO Group Corporation.
FAO Group Corporation is the first one.
Ajá, quien fue nació como una estrategia entre el líder Mao Zedong y la Unión Soviética como una forma de industrializar a lo que fue al recién naciente República China.
It was a joint venture between China and Stalin's USSR.
En segundo lugar tenemos a SAIC Motor Corporation, que si bien esta también tiene sus antecedentes en los años de 1950, también esta nació primeramente de iniciar a la provincia de Shanghai en el sector de autopartes automotriz. Ya
SAIC Motor
llegando a
Corporation,
1964,
also from the 50s, in Shanghai.
a fundar lo que es la marca de SAIC Motor Corporation. Actualmente esta empresa tiene joint ventures con Volkswagen o con Maxus Automotive Corporation.
Joint ventures with Volkswagen and Maxus Corporation.
La tercera empresa es Dongfeng, cuya fundación pues también fue en la cúspide de la llamada Gran Revolución Proletaria de Mao Zedong.
The third company is from the period of the proletarian cultural revolution in China, Dongfeng.
Ajá, y de esta forma, pues Dongfeng también destaca sus joint ventures con Nissan, Honda y la recién empresa Peugeot Citroën.
Joint ventures with Nissan, Honda, and Peugeot.
Y bueno, la cuarta empresa, o el cuarto fantástico, sería la empresa de Chang'an Automobile, que es uno de los principales grupos automovilísticos chinos, que tiene más de 14 bases de fabricación y más de 34 plantas en todo el mundo.
The fourth fantastic is Chang'an, with 14 manufacturing bases and 34 plants.
Ajá, y bueno, esta empresa ha realizado joint ventures con Ford, Mazda y JMC.
Ford, Mazda, and JMC have been joint ventures with Chang'an.
La siguiente, bueno, en la siguiente lámina relatamos un poco como cuál ha sido el contexto que ha tomado la industria automotriz china para poco a poco aumentar su presencia a nivel internacional.
The strategy of automotive, Chinese automotive industry to get into the world market.
En 1999, China ocupaba el 9º lugar a nivel mundial en la producción automotriz, con 1.82 millones de automóviles.
China was the 9th producer of automobiles in 1999, 40% of United States production.
Y bueno, a partir de esto, tras su ingreso a la Organización Mundial del Comercio, se puso en marcha una de las metas del 10º plan quinquenal, que era consolidar a través de la industria automotriz la internacionalización de 2 o 3 consorcios.
After the World Trade Organization incorporation, the objective was to increase the participation in the world market.
En 2008, y nuevamente haciendo hincapié al papel que tienen las crisis financieras, pues esta la tomamos como el punto cúspide para los vehículos de motor y, bueno, principalmente fabricados en China, gracias a la deslocalización que hubo de la producción en Occidente, la cual viene incluso desde la crisis de 1970.
2009 crisis is a turning point in terms of the internationalization of Chinese production. That it started before, but this was an important turnaround.
Y bueno, a partir de 2009, la producción de automotriz en China fue creciendo gradualmente, aumentando cerca de un 48% respecto a los años anteriores, llegando así en 2023 a liderar el mercado automotriz con una fabricación de 30.09 millones de unidades.
So in 2023, China has positioned itself as first producer in the world with 13.7 million units.
Y bueno, otro contexto que también ha tenido la industria automotriz, pues finalmente fue también el papel que ha tenido las estrategias de innovación tecnológica, como en este caso fue el plan Made in China.
The other relevant part of the strategy is technological development.
La cual ha sido una estrategia que se basa en la continua innovación para transformar a
Continuous
China y a su
innovation.
sector manufacturero.
To develop the manufacturing sector.
Así que, pues los llamados vehículos verdes no solamente son amigables con el medio ambiente, sino que también se trata de una estrategia para China como una apuesta a reconquistar lo que es el mercado automotriz internacional y con ello, pues también liderar el control de la cadena productiva de este sector.
The green vehicles are not only ecological friendly, but are part of a strategy of China to control the different elements of the value chain of the auto industry worldwide.
Y bueno, como podemos ver en la siguiente gráfica, de los últimos 8 años, cómo se ha ido reestructurando la producción automotriz dentro de China. Que en 2017 apenas sus propios fabricantes ocupaban el 40% de su participación en el mercado y para 2025 pues ahora esta participación ha ido incrementando, postulándose al un 67.69% del mercado total de este país.
So we see in this chart the evolution of the share of local car maker that has been increasing in the Chinese passenger vehicles market.
En la siguiente lámina podemos observar igual el comportamiento de la composición de las exportaciones, igual nuevamente tomando como referencia los últimos 5 años, principalmente desde 2020, de cómo poco a poco también se ha ido modificando el tipo de automóviles que China está exportando, ¿no? En 2020, la exportación de vehículos de combustible ocupaba el 80%. A 2025, pues esta participación ha ido disminuyendo gradualmente a pasar al 71.2% y dándole espacio a lo que es la exportación de vehículos eléctricos con el 28.8% del total de sus exportaciones.
Yeah, it's clear. It's the increase of electrical vehicles as share of total product exports.
En la siguiente lámina igual podemos ver la participación del mercado que han tenido las empresas y de acuerdo al tipo de automóviles que se está produciendo, ¿no? Primeramente tenemos los vehículos eléctricos de batería, donde está BYD. De hecho, BYD en las tres, en lo que es los autos eléctricos y los autos híbridos, pues podemos tener que ocupa la mayor parte de la cuota de mercado con un 18 y 56% respectivamente.
Yeah, BGT has the biggest role in these different types of electric vehicles, battery and hybrid.
Y bueno, de esta manera BYD se ha situado como un principal oponente a lo que es pues esta empresa automotriz líder de Estados Unidos, Tesla, en este sector.
Yes, BGD has positioned as the biggest competitor of USA-based Tesla.
Y bueno, como podemos ver en este cuadro, el conglomerado BYD vendió 1.5 millones de unidades y logró captar una capitalización de mercado de 788 mil millones de yuanes. Mientras tanto, Tesla vendió 439.7 mil unidades, pero aquí su capitalización de mercado pues sí se ve aventajada en comparación con el valor de BYD, el cual pues bueno, Tesla alcanzó 3.76 billones de yuanes en capitalización de mercado.
Even though BGT sold more units than Tesla, Tesla's capitalization is much higher than BGT's.
Y bueno, más adelante en las siguientes láminas mostraremos, bueno, por qué se ha dado como esta ventaja en en lo que es la cuestión de la capitalización de mercado de las acciones.
Yeah, the next figures show how this capitalization difference have evolved in North America, Europe, China, etc.
Y bueno, como podemos ver, China concentra a nivel mundial el grueso de la producción automotriz, mostrando una evolución clave, como ya lo habíamos mencionado, pasando de 8 millones de unidades en lo que era en la crisis 2008 y pues alcanzando su pico más alto en 2018 con más de 27 millones de unidades.
So China is already the dominant force in the international auto market, from 8 million to 27 million units in its peak in 2018.
Y bueno, en la siguiente lámina, y como ya se lo habíamos mencionado en dos láminas anteriores, de cuál es esta pues diferencia entre la capitalización de mercado. Y aquí, bueno, tenemos una teoría, tanto la doctora Girón y yo, pues es justamente cómo se está comportando y cuál es la participación que tienen los mercados financieros dentro de esta estrategia de reestructuración y financiamiento de la industria automotriz china.
So now they present their own hypothesis about the difference of capitalization volumes in the US, Tesla, and on China.
Y bueno, entre muchas opiniones que hemos recolectado a través de nuestra investigación, pues también encontramos que justamente estas estrategias, que no solamente se limitan a incentivos fiscales, sino también en la parte de los accionistas, pues han provocado pues también el descontento, ¿no? Principalmente de los grandes fabricantes, quienes pues se han manifestado como un poco de descontento a través de los enormes subsidios que el gobierno chino pues ha otorgado a esta industria automotriz.
Many of the non-Chinese producers are against the subsidies that the Chinese state is giving to its own auto industry. They have complained about that.
Bueno, pues esto ha provocado que también pues diversas empresas o diversos grupos automotrices pues también opten porque pues China regrese a fabricar a su territorio, porque recordemos que ahora ya no solamente China fabrica dentro de territorio nacional, sino que también poco a poco se ha ido metiendo sigilosamente en los mercados de Europa principalmente a fabricar y pues también esto ha levantado diversas opiniones de que pues la producción automotriz, tanto para fabricantes chinos como para fabricantes occidentales, debería de estar en las mismas condiciones, tanto de mano de obra como de competencia y de incentivos fiscales.
This has generated reactions about the internationalization of Chinese production in other countries. These reactions claim that the conditions for national and Chinese producers should be the same in terms of fiscal support, etc. So it's a drive to try to expel production of Chinese autos back to China.
Y bueno, otro aspecto a considerar es pues el control que tiene China sobre las tierras raras o los minerales raros, los cuales pues han poco a poco incrementando su participación ahora en la llamada revolución verde automotriz.
One important issue is the control of China of rare earths, which are an strategic element in the development of this industry.
Y bueno, al igual que las políticas que se han aplicado a la industria automotriz, pues en este caso también en la cuestión del manejo de las tierras raras, pues China ha venido invirtiendo desde hace más de 30 años en el proceso y en el refinamiento de estas tierras, controlando aproximadamente el 90% de la producción del procesamiento mundial de estos minerales.
Yeah, this control of China is the result of 30 years of investing in the rare earth sector.
Bueno, en la siguiente lámina podemos ver cómo está la composición de los minerales raros y pues obviamente quiénes son los países que lo concentran. Como podemos ver, pues China es quien concentra la mayoría de estas tierras raras incluso, bueno, ahora en la llamada guerra arancelaria 2.0 con Estados Unidos, pues también se puso en jaque este sector, ¿no? Según argumentos de diversos autores que también han dado seguimiento a este comportamiento de este mercado, pues destacan que las restricciones y las exportaciones, principalmente a los suministros en la industria automotriz, tanto en la Unión Europea o en otros países donde son directamente estos fabricantes, pues estas reservas, si pongamos un escenario drástico de que le cerraran las puertas a China, pues estas empresas no tendrían como más allá de 3 meses para poder como solventar los costos de estas materias para sus empresas.
Yeah, the control of China of the rare earths market, it's a big issue. In the USA tariff war 2.0 against China, but also in terms of the strategic role of these rare earths in producers in Europe and in the USA.
Bueno, en la siguiente lámina también podemos notar que otro de los minerales que también es muy importante para esta industria, pues es la producción de litio, ¿no? Y podemos
Lithium
ver cómo,
production is also very important for the sector.
y bueno, podemos ver cómo la producción, en la siguiente lámina, por favor. La producción nacional de litio en China frente a la producción doméstica de Estados Unidos, igual, de este mineral.
China
Y también,
versus
por ende,
USA
también tenemos,
production of lithium.
y tenemos también de otro lado la producción o la fabricación, el manufacturado de baterías de este mineral. Igual podemos ver cómo China aventaja en esta situación, donde básicamente estamos dando que es más que autosuficiente este país sobre esta producción de baterías.
Chinese domination of the battery manufacturing.
Y bueno, pues esta ventaja que le ha dado de poseer como la mayor cantidad de las reservas de tierras raras, pues ha hecho que incluso las baterías de algunas empresas automotrices como lo que es BYD, pues tengan como menores costos, bueno, y esto es una mayor ventaja, ¿no?
The
Frente a
control
pues,
of
también,
rare earths have had as one of the results the minor costs of producing batteries in China.
y bueno, esto también ha provocado que también estas baterías, al estar también innovando constantemente en hacer más eficiente y, y tener mayor rendimiento, pues ha provocado que incluso hasta otras empresas que pues no producen como este tipo de baterías sean clientes también como de divisiones de empresas de BYD.
So also Chinese BYD batteries are becoming more efficient. So also non-Chinese companies are dependent of Chinese batteries.
Y bueno, la siguiente lámina podemos ver cómo se encuentra la composición de los minerales que se utilizan dentro de la fabricación tanto de un automóvil convencional frente a un automóvil eléctrico, ¿no? Y podemos saber ahí destacando pues cuáles son los principales minerales, obviamente quitando lo que es el aluminio y el acero, y podemos tener aquí como el cobre, el litio, que es uno de los principales minerales, el manganesio, el cobalto, el grafito, el zinc y las tierras raras, ¿no? Y cuál es su peso por kilogramo por cada vehículo, frente a lo que es los minerales que normalmente son utilizados para la fabricación de un automóvil convencional, donde apenas tenemos 4 de estos minerales que en comparación con los que tienen un automóvil eléctrico.
In this table, we exclude steel and aluminum.
Y bueno, también dando seguimiento a lo que hemos venido diciendo del papel de los inversionistas institucionales, pues aquí también podemos confrontar en esta tabla como cuáles son los actores que están detrás del impulso que se le está dando a cada una de estas empresas, ¿no? Por ejemplo, para Tesla tenemos que se encuentran pues destacados agencias de seguros, por ejemplo, financieras como Vanguard, BlackRock, Morgan Stanley, en comparación con BYD, ¿no? Que igual, pues al parecer, a pesar de también tener como importantes empresas, por ejemplo, lo que es Boston Common Asset, pues no podemos como dimensionar, ¿no? El capital que está dominando Vanguard en comparación con estos, ¿no? Entonces esto también da impulso a que las cotizaciones que se encuentran de estas empresas pues también se eleven y por ende también se hagan estrategias dentro de la industria, dentro de la producción para poder impulsar estas acciones.
The role of institutional investors for both firms.
Doctora, no sé si quiera cerrar con algo. Está silenciada.
No, thank you very much, Abelardo, to translate.
Thank you, Abelardo.
Yes, it has, you have made a great work. And well, this conference and this paper that we are writing right now with Adheli is part of a big project where we have been studying the different corporations, that 10 principal Chinese corporations around the world, and also by the hypothesis of Schumpeter innovation, and also the hypothesis of Hyman Minsky of a big government and big bank, and also the importance of the institutional investors in the Chinese companies, because when we talk about the Chinese state corporations, we think that it's only the state, but the thing that we have found is that the financial markets are doing a very well job in this Chinese corporation. So that dispute between USA and China is very interesting because most of the corporations, of the mutual funds and institutional investors that are financing this innovation in China are the ones that are settled in USA, and of course in France, in Germany, and in other development countries. So this is our first paper in the green innovation corporations, and also maybe next time we will, in the next conference of IIPPE, we will show the results of what is also, of course, it is very important that green innovation, but also the impact in the social places where is the lithium and all these rare earths. Thank you very much, and thank you, Abelardo, and thank you, Sam, for doing this conference, a great Chinese group. Thank you very much.
Okay, many thanks to the two presenters and the translator. So it's now my turn. Try to do my presentation in 20 minutes, right, so that we can have time for discussion. Yeah, full screen.
I want to.
Okay, the presentation is purported to serve two purposes. One concerns one is the concerns try to speculate over China's future performance in the green transition. That is the first thing to do. The second thing is that to see what lessons can be drawn from China for people concerned with the practice of the renewable capitalism. Right? People concerned with the desirability and viability of coping with the climatic change within the confines of capitalism. That's the central to the emerging literature about the renewables capitalism. Now, I've tried to approach these topics at two different levels. The first, of course, is to look back at what China has done or its performance in the green transition so far, and to highlight the complexity and therefore the difficulty of making definite judgment and assessments, and therefore or speculation about the future performance. But secondly, it is even more difficult concerning the concept of capitalism, when it applies to China. And at any rate, it is also a difficulty for understanding the world as a whole, as well, right? That I would refer to the long-lasting debates among different schools of Marxism to talk about the different way of understanding capitalism. And then in the case of China, with a mixed economic system at the periphery of world capitalism, how could this concept be applied? So these two put together would therefore hopefully offer some lessons about what lessons can be drawn from China for the renewables capitalism. Now, the complexities of China's performance in the green transition is such that, in the first place, China is of systemic importance for the world as a whole in the green transition because of the fact that China is both the largest greenhouse emitting country and of a very high proportion, like 33% in the year 2023. Right. You can see that starting from the 14% in the turn of century all the way up to a third of the world total. Right. And at the same time, China has also been leading the development of the green technology industries, not just in terms of the making and also the users of the green technologies industries. So of course, talking about China's responsibility for coping with climate change, there are different principles that could be applied. In addition to looking at the flows of emission, that every year, as we have seen in the year 2023, China had 1/3 of the world total. But there's, of course, issues about the per capita emission, because after all, everyone of the humankind must be treated equal, right? But any deviation from that is outright racism, which it cannot be acceptable from any part of the left. Right? So, and also we need to look at the historical legacy of the accumulation of emission, as well as to look at the consumption side rather than just the production side in terms of the emission. But all these aside, it is still fair to say that China has a great responsibility for the coping with the climate change, not just in terms of the 33% of the flows of the emission, but also in terms of in the per capita terms. Fortunately, we can see that decoupling has made great progress in terms of the relationship between economic growth and the reduction in emission. As we have seen, China, starting from the year 2005, the first year when China became the biggest emitting country in the world. And from that point onward, up until 2023, the carbon intensity, that is emission per GDP, decreased by 46%. That is slightly better than the United States, which was undergoing a process of deindustrialization, as opposed to China's very fast pace of industrialization. But this notwithstanding, still China make the efforts and achieve the decoupling. And the same for the advanced countries. Of course, it's the same that they have been undergoing deindustrialization of massive scales. On the other hand, the developing world to develop, they do need to embark on the path of industrialization, which makes the decoupling far more difficult. But then, with all these numbers, we can still see that on the other side of the performance is, as I mentioned, the developments of green technology industries, not just in terms of the making of the products, but also the using of the products. Right? So the China's cumulative renewables capacity, right, accounted for almost a half of the world total by the year 2022. And according to the respective capacity ambitions, it's predicted that China's this ratio is to reach 2/3, right, by the year 2030, and probably it is likely to be, first of all, earlier in achieving this, and also of a higher level of the China's ratio of the cumulative renewables capacity. But as we know that it is widely reported or widely estimated that this year, 2025, China is likely to achieve the peaking carbon emission, despite the fact that its commitment is to achieve that target by the year 2030. Right? So 5 years earlier than that. And in contrast, we have seen what has happened to the United States. Right? It withdrew twice, like 2017 and this year, from the Paris Agreement. So anyway, this represents the optimistic or positive side of the performance. And in terms of using the green technology products, of course, the most spectacular development is concerns the development of the electrical vehicles. Last year, 2024, China produced 13 million new energy vehicles, mostly electrical cars, and of which and this accounted for 70% of the world total. And of this total, 2.1 million were exported to the rest of the world. So the overall assessments that China make the commitment, the NDC is to peak carbon emissions by the year that before. I think that it's necessary to emphasize that it's not by 2030, but rather before, with the unspecified year. So to set this is the latest year to achieve the targets, and then try to achieve it as early as possible. Now, is this sufficient? Are these NDCs sufficient? That is a matter of debate, right? Because it depends on how to allocate the fair share of the cutting carbon emission to China, and also depends on the sum total of the shares of the world, whether or not that's sufficient for achieving the Paris agreements, the targets of keeping the global temperature no more than 2 degrees Celsius, and if possible, no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to the pre-industrial revolution level. Now, most scholars by now tend to be quite pessimistic that given the existing NDCs of the world total, it's unlikely that we can achieve the 1.5 targets. And also the global warming seems to be moving much faster than what have been perceived or predicted in the earlier analysis. Anyway, all this implies that a great deal of further efforts would be needed, both for China and for the broader world. And whether or not China should have taken up even the bigger share of the responsibility is another matter. But let's move on to the more conceptual discussion about the dynamics and the contradictions of trying to achieve the green transition, right, using China as a one of the important examples. Now, so of course, the people talk about the growth, but it is also fair to say that at least for developing countries, and before at least in terms of the technical feasibility and in terms of the possible compensation from the advanced countries to the developing world, all this taken into consideration, it is fair to say that a balance somehow is needed, balancing the attempts to reduce the emission, and on the one side, and on the other side, the energy security for the popular, the genuine social needs, right? All this balance is needed, right? And the discourse on renewable capitalism, in a sense, try to find out whether such a balance can be achieved within the limits of capitalism and the existing publication, the published works that they place hopes on China, mainly with the arguments that capitalism might have intrinsic difficulties with the green transitions, but China, at least the positive side of China, seems to offer the lessons that if every country follow the examples of China in trying to promote the development of green technology industries, then it is still there is still the possibility of achieving the green transition. Now, the main difficulty with this literature is that they treat what is not capitalism in terms of the market versus the state, right? So analyzing whether the renewables replacing fossil fuels, whether that is feasible or not, depending on the working of the market and of the states, quite pessimistic about the market and quite optimistic about the state. Now, that is not what China claims or perceives itself has been doing, but in the case of China, the official version is the so-called efficient market plus effective governance. So it's not markets as such, but some kind of markets that need to be shaped by the broader institutional environment to make it work in the direction of promoting the green transition. Right. So we need to go into the more substance about these arguments in a moment, but that's the general point, that it's not market in abstract, but specific types of markets that might be consistent with the green transition. But then also you need the effective governments. It's not government as such, but governments are, as we see, at least in the developmental as well as entrepreneurial, and also with its mission, not just concerning economic development, but also a broader mission, like what China calls the new development ideas, right? That is, you need the development to be based on technological progress, creation, and also to be based on so-called inclusive of social consideration, that the benefits of development need to be shared by everyone of the society, and most importantly, green the transition. But these are known as the new development ideas of the Chinese leadership, which is its vision as the principle governing the efficient markets and effective governments. Now, if this is the case, then the green renewables capitalism literature thus identifies three intrinsic difficulties of the markets in the capitalist world in relation to the green transition. The first thing is that because up until now, in a technical sense, that the renewables are difficult to be commodified. That in terms of stable generation of electricity and connection to the grids. So they are not favored by capital. They might be beneficial for the society, but not for capital. But secondly, existing fossil capitals have market powers, and they, of course, they would not like that to see the devaluation of their existing assets. Right? So therefore, they tend to resist the transition to renewables. And then thirdly, in the context of neoliberal financialized capitalism, therefore short-termism is the dominant characteristic of the working of the economy and of the markets. Right? Therefore, the upfront long-term investment that is normally needed for renewables tend to be quite unlikely to come about. Now, so all this put together need not imply that there's no hope for renewables capitalism. Still, we need to look at the working of capitalism at the deeper levels in terms of three levels of the logic of the profitability, right? At the individualistic level of the capitals, and then the system of all the capital put together in the short term and over the long term. It is only the first logic that defines the boundary of capitalism. After all, we have the historical experience of the golden age of capitalism, which for a prolonged period of time did define the first two logics of capitalism, but only the fall of golden age because of this difficulty of defying the third logic, right? The systemic profitability in the long term. Now, if this is the case, right, I don't have time to go into the details, but just very quickly use the examples of the new energy vehicle experience and just have a quick look at this graph, the profitability of China's industrial total, right, and China's auto industry, and the biggest electric car producer, BYD. You can see that the auto industry underwent the fast pace of profitability decline. And the BYD, before the turnarounds of the profitability in the year 2023, its profit rate was consistently below that of the auto industry as a whole. Despite this, we can see that the auto industry had the very fast pace of the expansion of capitals, right? 2.9 times 2024 compared to 2012. And for Chinese industry as a whole, 2.3. And for BYD is 11 times. So continues to invest despite the profitability decline. Now, conceptually, this performance is consistent with the so-called developmental states and entrepreneurial capital. That is to say that this could defy the first two logics of capitalism. Whether or not the development of this Chinese industry, EV industry, is able to defy the logic of capitalism, that is systemic profitability over the long term, it remains to be seen. And similarly, whether Chinese performance in the green transition is able to defy this logic of capitalism is still up until now unclear. Right? After all, the green transition is a prolonged transition. Right? it would still, we're still in this process. So it would, we need to wait and see. And therefore, the Chinese experience cannot serve as a proof that renewables capitalism does work. That of course is quite pessimistic, but unfortunate for the existing words that try to cite Chinese experience to think that it is possible to achieve renewables capitalism. Okay, so that's my presentation. So hope it makes sense to you. Right, we have about 10 to 15 minutes for question and discussion. See anyone would like to contribute to the discussion? Yeah. Yeah,
I have some questions, but obviously haven't read the paper. I'm going to listen to what you got, and I have problems with my eyes, so I can only read so much. Are you calling the Chinese system renewable? Somebody in this article is calling a Chinese system renewable capitalism. Is that you're getting at?
Well, actually, I don't have time to go into that.
You talk about renewable capital. So where does that mean?
So what I'm saying is that China is not an example of renewables at all. It's not necessarily an example of renewables capitalism.
It's not.
Not necessarily. So cannot give the support to the optimistic claim made by those people.
Okay, that's what I want to know. So
Yeah.
Other people are making optimistic claims that China is an example of renewable capitalism.
Yeah, and therefore the rest of the world could achieve
Okay.
the same thing.
That gets into a lot of philosophical arguments about the nature of capitalism in terms of wage labor and other sorts of things.
Yeah, exactly.
And the nature of the market. Okay.
Yeah, we took if you like, we can talk about this, but let's first focus on the So let's not talk about capitalism, but talk about renewables. Right. Okay. Yeah, please.
Trying to work on fuel industry. I'm part of the research network, so I would be very happy to engage more. I recently had the opportunity to go to China in June, and I Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and I visited all the companies that you will find it. And I mean, I was reflecting on, I've been very impressed by the BYD visiting and meeting engineers there. Like, it's been one of the most impressive experiences so far. I'm wondering to what extent it makes sense to, I mean, you point at investment, yes. To what extent it makes sense to compare with BYD to other auto players, to the extent that in my view, the strength is not simply investment, but the level of diversification across sectors that I've barely seen any other auto players, because it's difficult to classify BYD and compare to other companies. It's now a company that works in renewable, in railway, in automotive, in battery. Can we really compare it to the trend of the auto industry or to other auto players, or should it be assessed and in case study? I don't know to what extent, but it's a unique case of common strategy. Let's start on that.
Okay, it's Fanqi or
So your question is not a compliment, but it's a compliment, but I find it difficult to include it in a trend because it doesn't only belong to an auto. It doesn't only belong to renewable. It's all of this, and they were super fast in entering all different markets.
Yeah.
So it's a very unique case. There are across 4 sectors today, but we can't really put them only on the money. I don't know.
Yeah, I think BYD has a higher degree of vertical integration with from battery all the way.
In a few years.
Yeah. And the opposite case is that say in the Hefei, that battery and also the electronic the AI system being supplied by, say, by Huawei, and therefore it's really making a car, but not really producing the different components of, nowadays, not just components, subsystems of the car. Right? So in a sense, it is true that this, whether they are comparable or not, that after all, ultimately, they need to sell the final product in the market. In that sense, they are comparable. They might outsource from, say, batteries from other companies as opposed to BYD's producing in-house. But ultimately, the test is still in the electrical cars market. Right? So BYD versus Tesla or versus the Xiaomi. Right? They need to satisfy the market for the vehicles anyway. Yeah. Anyone has a question?
You're saying that right now, the profitability within the industry or within these firms is falling, and yet they still seem to be expanding.
Yeah, whether or not it's falling, I'm not sure. That at least up until 2024, BYD has the upward movement of the profit rate, but the auto industry as a whole, and probably the new energy vehicles industry, both have continued to undergo the profitability decline. Right? So much so that last week, the Chinese government, several ministries came together to, I think, to ask the auto companies not to engage in competition by means of the cutting of the price wars. Right? The price war is said to be unfavorable for the long-term development of the industry. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, a little bit of time, I'll ask a question just along the line what you just finished, both of you. Just what you think of it. That's what they're beginning to talk about here. That particularly in auto, but in some other industries, China's making something of a change, which is over the last 5 years or longer, they seriously promoted overinvestment, that is putting out too much output in order to develop cutthroat competition, with the idea that that would drive forward technological advancement. And as you just said, in some recent meetings of some of the high bodies of China, they're now talking about we better slow up on this somewhat, and we ought to back off a little bit on cutthroat competition. So obviously it's just happening, it's impressions, but to both of you, this seemed to be something which does indicate some inflection in the direction, in the way that China is developing its industrial output, or is it just a little bit of hot air that people are talking about right now?
Yeah, I think that's the question about overproduction or over accumulation. First of all, it's real. It's the reality. Secondly, the interpretation of this reality. It's just that a lot of capital ought to have gone. Right? Because talking about profitability is the total profits as a ratio to total capital, and the way that actually the market in that sense is not that efficient. China's the electrical car industry has received huge amounts of investments, not really by the government, but really mainly by venture capital, and it's just that venture capital has the perception of the first mover advantage. It's the aim to create a kind of, if not monopoly, at least economies of scale, not just looking at the Chinese market, but the world total, because the green transition is a global process. So the rest of the world would also need, it's not just the electrical cars, but say China's the solar panel and the similar things, right? So the venture capital moves in, investing a lot. Quite some of them end up failure. They could not produce turn out the products that meets the demand of the markets. They should have gone. The capital should have been killed off.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not a matter of overinvestment. It still needs investment, but really investment in addition to getting rid of the existing unviable investments. So that's my understanding. But we seem to have been talking about the positive side of the development, but we need to bear in mind that overinvestment, over-accumulation is the real problem. Like cut-flow competition is the real problem. So that is to say what is known as the efficient market is not yet that efficient. It has a strong elements of venture capitalists that really neoliberal financialized. So look at the NEV companies. Most of them are new startups that being the outcome of investment by internet companies or venture capitalists. Okay, so any more questions or comments?
Just quickly, because you said that the NEV industry may have divided between other than 3 laws and that's one of them is that the rate of profit is dropping, then it's continuing with investment.
Yeah.
Now, is this entirely down to the kind of speculation of the venture capital that's continued to back all these investments, or is it some kind of state directed kind of development in it, even though it is predominantly a private sector, the entire thing?
I think it's mixed. I think from the Fanqi's presentation that there are different sources of investment or at least that with the support of multiple agents, government and industrial as well as financial capital. Right. So some investments defying the logic of profitability might be the outcome of entrepreneurial capitalist activities, but it could also be the outcomes of speculative financial activities. As I mentioned, that venture capital, they move in not because they are entrepreneurial industrial capital, but rather because of their perception, just like in the internet bubbles, that they perceive that they will be able to be to get back the returns in the future. Right. Okay, so we okay, so we'll come to the end of this panel.
Oh, okay. Thank you. We are closing now. See you.